So now let's go over for loops. If you've already done the JavaScript module, this will just be some revision for you, and it will be slightly different syntax to what you've seen. So in Python they make for loops extremely easy. Now for loops can be used for mainly two things. One is for iterating through a list. So for example, if I had a list that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I could use a for loop to print out each of these ones in turn. The other use of for loops is to have a block of code executed a certain number of times. So let's go over those two examples together. First we'll do the second one I mentioned, so let's put a comment, executing code certain number of times. And then the other one is iterating through data sets. For example, lists. So here we're just going to use a very basic example. So we're going to say for I in range 10. Okay, so what we're doing here, we're creating a variable called I, and in Python it automatically sets I to the value of 0. And it's saying what, so for I in range 10, print I. Let's see what happens here, and then we'll talk about what's just happened. So essentially what happens automatically is that Python sets I to the value of 0. And it's basically saying in the range of 10. So it's basically saying until I is less than, so while I is less than 10 basically. So for I in range 10, it basically says do this 10 times. Now I starts off with a value of 0, and we can set this to be wherever you want. I mean, just for when teaching for loops, people tend to use I, but I could use number, for example, as long as I change it here as well. Basically what it's doing is it's creating number as just a standard variable and of 0, and then it executes this code. Each time it executes the code, number, or whatever this is called, increases by 1, and it does that 10 times. So if I were to, for example, let's have range 40, it would go from 0 up to 39, so it'd iterate 39 times to do the same thing. We could do a number of different things. So for, let's say we have a different one. Let's have another variable called count, and every time we want count to be multiplied by 5. So we could do count equals count times 5. Or to do shorthand, just like in JavaScript, we could do multiplied equals 5, and that will do the same thing. And then we can print out count as well using dot format. Here, put in count, and so there we go. So we can add lots and lots of code into our for loops, and we can do whatever we want. This time all we're doing is the number here. This is the variable we're using, which is called number. But a lot of the time, if you're just practicing, you can just use I. So it's printing that out, and then it's giving you the count number each time, and then it's just going up each time we iterate through that. So that's one way of using for loops. Let's just change that to 3 so it's a bit smaller. So the next way we can use for loops is to go through a data set. So most likely you'd be using lists for this. But you can use it in interesting ways. The easiest way to do it, for example, you could say for, and we can call this whatever we want. We could call for element in, and let's give this a variable name, my list. So for element in list, and then we put a colon, sorry, in my list, and then a colon, enter, and it automatically indents for us here. So we can say for element in my list, let's just do print element. So basically what we should get each time is the element being printed off. So we can just iterate through a list. We can also iterate through a string the same way. Hi there, I like Python. So if I change my list to my string, you'll see that it outputs each character one at a time. Obviously that doesn't have as much use as using list a lot of the time, but it's there if you need it. So not only can we just iterate through a list like that, but we could also make changes to the elements. So we could, for example, we could put element, or we could just print out element times 10. Or we could, for example, print out element value, oops, there we go, dot format element. So it looks a bit nicer. We can basically do lots of different things. We can manipulate each of these in turn however we like. So those are two basic uses of how you can use for loops. So in industry, for example, let's say in machine learning, very often what we want to do is we have a huge block of code where we're essentially, we have code to train our algorithm. Don't worry about what that means for now, if you don't know what an algorithm is. But essentially, we want to train our algorithm 1,000 times. So what we would say is we'd say for I in range 1,000, then we'd say, train the algorithm 1,000 times basically, because we want it to train once, and then we want to do it again and again and again. So we just say for I in range 1,000, for example, do this many training sessions, and it helps to make our AI smarter, let's say. So that's one actual use of using for loops. So what have we gone over in this lecture? Essentially, we've gone over how we can execute a block of code numerous times by using for I in range. And remember, we don't have to use I here. We can use whatever we want. We can call it number or blah, as long as we also refer to it in the for loop. So for blah in range, and then we can set here in these brackets how many times we want our block of code to execute. We put a colon, and then indented, usually 4 spaces inwards, that's where we include all of our code. If we didn't have an indentation, for example, so I'm just going to do Shift Tab, expected an indented block. So, and it's pointing to the line count times equals 5. So we want to make sure that everything in here is indented. If, for example, I were to have a line here, you'll see that this happens first, because everything that's indented here will then be within the for loop, so it will happen 1,000 times. Let's actually just go for 10 times, and this won't be included because it's not indented. So we'll have that happen 10 times, and then at the end we'll have hello just once, because it's not included in that block. So we went over how we can use basic for loops using in range. After that, we went into how we can iterate through data sets. Most commonly, we use lists. So we can say for I call this element, again, you could just call it I or whatever you want. Obviously, when you're working in a production environment, when other people are looking at your code as well, it's much better to give it names that are quite readable and make sense. Otherwise, if you just have I, it's kind of hard to understand what's going on. But you can say for element, for example, in the list, print that out. Or we could do my list plus, not my list, element plus equals 100. And then, so we're manipulating the values as we go through. There are many things that you can do with that, but that's the basics of for loops. So what I recommend you do is have a go at trying this out yourself. So try doing a for in range. So try doing a for loop like that, and then try creating your own list and iterating through that using the for in. So have a go at that, and I'll see you in the next lecture.